Dear guests, esteemed participants, and valued attendees, on behalf of the Security Studies and Rule of Law Association, we warmly welcome you to the second webinar we are organizing. Our association is dedicated to combating human rights violations with a focus on justice and the rule of law. We strive to bring human rights violations, particularly those occurring in Turkey, to international attention and work in collaboration with both local and international organizations to address these issues. Welcome to our webinar titled Understanding Hate Speech and Non-Radicalization, Case Studies from Turkey. Today we have gathered here to discuss the complex dynamics of hate speech and radicalization process, explore possible solutions, and analyze specific case studies from Turkey. In today's digital age, with the increasing influence of social media, hate speech is on the rise, contributing to societal division, violence, and even radicalization. At the same time, the process of disengaging individuals from radicalized paths, known as deradicalization, has become an increasingly important topic at both academic and policy levels. To delve deeper into these issues, we are honored to have one of the leading experts in the field, Dr. Kamil Yılmaz, with us today. Dr. Yılmaz is a lecturer at the Department of Criminology, Sociology, and Social Policy at Swansea University in the United Kingdom. He holds a PhD in Applied Political Anthropology from Columbia University and multiple master degrees in international affairs, political anthropology, and applied anthropology. Furthermore, he served for 18 years in the Turkish National Police and worked with various international organizations such as the United Nations and the Southeast European Law Enforcement Center. Dr. Yılmaz's book, Disengaging from Terrorism, Lessons from the Turkish Penitents, is considered a pioneering work in the field of terrorism and political violence. Today, he will be presenting on the relationship between hate speech and radicalization, as well as discussing specific case studies from Turkey. Dear audience, after the presentation, we will ask our guests your questions. Please feel free to share them in the chat. Dr. Yılmaz, thank you again for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. So let me share my screen. I have a presentation. I want to talk about two recent studies that we conducted with my colleagues. One of them is on hate speech, and the other one is on non-radicalization. And we focused on case studies from Turkey, and the case and the population is the Gülen movement. I'm going to give you some brief information about that. But in a nutshell, before starting from the get-go, I want to let you know that I'll try to explain how the Gülen movement and its members have not been radicalizing despite being victims of various human rights violations, which include hate speech, job loss, imprisonment, and forced migration, among other things. So let me start with a brief background on the Gülen movement. Within their own words, Gülen movement is a civil society movement that focuses on education, spirituality, peace, and interfaith dialogue. They are running over 1,000 schools, universities around the world. They have had numerous media outlets, professional associations like TUSKON, and business enterprises like Asya Bank and Kaynak Holding, etc. Many people who are not familiar with the movement are perplexed when it comes to understanding the movement, because when you focus on the focus of the movement on religion and piety and religious activities, it's a religious movement. But when you look at the outreach activities of the group and the social networks that they have built up to now, it's a social movement. But when you look at the existence of its members within the bureaucracy and state apparatus, then you can say that it's a political movement. So people who are familiar with the Turkey and the Turkish politics and the Gülen movement, I think will agree that the movement is all of these things. So it's a combination of religious, social, and political movement. And of course, which has some implications in terms of where the group stands in Turkey and the global politics. So I'm gonna show you some pictures. In all these pictures, you see the leader, the late leader of the movement, Fethullah Gülen, and you see former prime ministers and presidents, and also Pope John Paul II. And the pictures and the photos are self-explanatory because it shows that the movement was a respected movement, as well as the leader of the movement. But the most important among these is the current leader, who's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, current president of Turkey, who has been leading the country since 2002. For a long time, Gülen movement and the AK Party of Erdogan had a very good relationship, which was a symbiotic relationship. So the AK Party was benefiting from the movement, but the movement was also benefiting from its good relations with the AK Party. And some authors call this, in terms of the behavior of the movement, as politics of engagement. So Gülen movement has always tried to engage with the current leading parties in Turkey. But around 2011, something happened, and then there was a tug of war, so to speak, started between Erdogan and the Gülen movement. So I put some important breaking point events into this timeline. Of course, we could put more, but these are the most important things. And again, for people who are familiar with the Turkish politics, there are obvious reasons and then obvious incidents and cases. So the first one was in 2011, was the reshuffling of pro-Gülen personnel in bureaucracy. And the second one was the summoning of Hakan Fidan to give a statement. Hakan Fidan is now foreign minister, but at the time he was the head of intelligence. So he was close to the Erdogan regime. And his invitation to give a statement was seen by the government as a threat to itself, because the prosecutors who invited Hakan Fidan were thought to be members of the Gülen movement. Then we had the closure of dershanes. Dershane means preparatory school for universities, and that's how the movement became very popular in Turkey. I don't have time to delve into it, but that was another important issue. But the most important two issues were 17 and 25 graft probe in 2013 and the failed coup attempt in 2016. So in the 1725 graft probe, 4 cabinet ministers were involved in a huge corruption, which was unprecedented in Turkey. And the probe also implicated President Erdogan, then Prime Minister, and his family as well. So the Erdogan regime got rid of the situation, this difficult situation, by choosing the group as a scapegoat and saying that it was a civilian coup against itself. So they got over with this problem. And in 2016, there was a military coup attempt, which was a failed attempt. That was the watershed moment for the movement, and then in terms of the relationship between the Gülen movement and AK Party, because after this event, again, the group, military officers especially, and the bureaucracy officers in different sections of the bureaucracy were seen as the members of the Gülen movement, and they were blamed for supporting or perpetrating the military coup. That's why the government started to clamp down on the movement within the first minutes of the failed coup attempt. And after that time, after the military coup attempt, the group was designated as a terrorist organization, and the Erdogan regime called it a FETÖ. FETÖ means, the so-called FETÖ means Fethullahist Terrorist Organization. Of course, many people, including the movement itself, do not accept this categorization. It's the designation by the regime. To go back to 2013, I had written another article in which I had analyzed the discourse of Erdogan after the graph probe. You see that there was a huge shift in terms of how the discourse of Erdogan was being played. And you can see that a lot of hate speech, like previously he was praising the movement a lot because of the symbiotic relationship, but starting with that event, because of being threatened by the movement, in his own words, he started to change his discourse. And then these are the things, kind of words that we start to see in his pep talks, in the party, rallies, election rallies, etc. And some of them are, you can see, parallel state, blood lobby, mobster lobby, and like leeches, witch hunt, those kind of things. And they also said they are an insidious terrorist organization. But the biggest problem that the movement had was, again, after the coup attempt, these are numbers from 2022 because I couldn't find more reliable numbers. But I am keeping this on purpose to show that even though these numbers are from like almost 3 years ago, they are still staggering. You see the numbers of the dismissed personnel from the bureaucracy, more than 150,000 people. And the number of investigated, I think, reached to 1 million or more. And you see the arrested, shut down school dormitories, and the people who lost their jobs, etc. So this is a snapshot of the post 2016 coup crackdown. So against the backdrop of this information, I first personally conducted a research to understand whether or not FETÖ as a hate speech term, because FETÖ became a pejorative term, derogatory term, because the members of the movement do not accept this terminology. It's again Fethullahist terrorist organization, but they don't accept, and it's used in public to demonize members of the movement. So I thought this language, this term, use of this term, would predict engagement on social media. Of course, that was not only my purpose to do scientific work to understand whether or not it predicts, but if it was the case, then it would mean a lot of things, and it would have a lot of implications for the members of the movement. And people who know Turkey, who know Turkish politics, again, we all know that it has a big impact. But I want to test whether or not it was the case. So the first thing I did was I ran a community detection analysis using Facebook data and over 35 million interactions from 2.1 million comments and over 51,000 Facebook posts. And I created a network graph to understand which groups in Turkey were amplifying the word FETÖ most. And people who are familiar with Turkish politics, again, it's not going to be a surprise when looking at this network graph, because the big bubbles in the graph are the famous mostly pro-AK Party news outlets like Yeni Akit, Yeni Şafak, A Haber, Sabah, but there are also some ultra-nationalist newspapers like Sözcü, Aydınlık, and Oda TV, etc. So this gave me an idea about the kind of media outlets that are amplifying the word FETÖ. Then, using this network graph, I created categories to understand, in what type of media the FETÖ word is being amplified most. So using that graph, I came up with three different groups, which is pro-AK Party group. AK Party is the current regime. Liberal Kemalist group, which is the main opposition party in Turkey, and people who support those ideals or ideologies. And the third group was ulusalcı, meaning ultra-nationalist. They are they are closer to liberal Kemalists than pro-AK Party, of course, but they are not the same. That's why I want to differentiate between those two categories. And to understand whether hate speech terms are predicting engagement on social media, I also created different dictionaries for each group, which were consisting of pro-AK Party words, liberal Kemalist words, and Gülen movement words, and moral emotional. And I called the Gülen movement words or dictionary as hate speech or demonization dictionary. Basically, I wanted to understand whether any of these words from these dictionaries, when they are used in social media in posts, they get more attention or attraction and engagement, of course. Sorry. And I also use some control variables, whether a post has a URL, has a media, meaning like photo or video, or the followers count, because I had to control those. They are the strongest predictors of social media engagement. So I want to put them aside to really understand the effects of these dictionaries. And the code and the data were made available for replication if anyone wants to do that. So these are the results. This one graph, but it has a lot of information, basically the results of the regression analysis. And the green dots are symbolizing Facebook data, and the purple is Twitter, and Instagram is the red one. As you can see, I also categorized or split the categorization of pro-AK Party and liberal Kemalist as identity words, Gülen movement dictionary as demonization words, and moral emotional as emotion. There's too many information, but I just want to say for the purpose of this presentation as results show that demonizing language about the Gülen movement was a strong predictor of shares and retweets across the three social media platforms. In some platforms, it was more than the others, but in some platforms, it was less. Here are the results specific for the Gülen movement dictionary. Just to put them in plain English, 1.53, for example, here means that any additional word about the Gülen movement in the pro-AK Party media increases the chance of engagement by 53%. And you can interpret the other numbers in the same way. So further, I want to also do some checks with these results. So I ran a series of different statistical analyses, including cluster robot standard error analysis, regressions with only identity words, because maybe the names of people like Erdogan or Fethullah Gülen would predict more than the identity words. So I excluded the people's names from the dictionaries, and I ran the regressions with the identity words only. And I also ran a relative importance analysis to understand which variable has the strongest power of explaining the phenomenon. But in all of these analyses, the results were similar. Again, on top of this, I also ran meta-analysis to understand among all of the datasets, like 9 datasets, which dictionary had the strongest effect size. And it was interesting that Gülen movement words So demonization words or hate speech words against the Gülen movement were the strongest predictor of virality in the Turkish social media. So this study was the first study that I conducted, but the second one was kind of a sequel to this, which I conducted with three friends of mine, with Dr. Alper Sözer, Dr. Niyazi Ekici from the United States, and Dr. Joe Whittaker from Swansea University, with whom I'm working right now in different projects. So this time we wanted to understand, despite being the victim of hate speech, despite being the victim of being like forced to migrate or being forced to being tortured or losing jobs, in addition to different things like stigmatization in society, we have seen almost no sign of radicalization coming from these people, specifically the members of the Gülen movement or people who have a positive idea about the movement. And studying terrorism for a long time, this was a very interesting phenomenon for me. That's why I thought it was worthy of a scientific inquiry. To achieve this task of understanding how and why they are not radicalizing, we conducted a qualitative research with my friends, and we interviewed with 15 participants from the movement or people who felt close to movement. You see the breakdown of the profiles of these people. I just want you to spend maybe like 20 seconds and see the different sections in the table as I'm talking, because I think it's a unique group of people and it's a unique population. As you can see, the education level is very high. Most of them are males. By the way, there are three groups of people within this table. People who were working in the state apparatus as in the bureaucracy, people working in the private sector, and then families of people who were victimized by the post July 15 regime. Again, maybe you may think that it's a biased sample, because we use snowballing technique, and the people we found were the first people were educated. They had masters or doctorate degrees, but because of the snowballing effect, they introduced us with people like them. But again, if you are familiar with the movement, it's not an exaggeration for the movement. The education level of the members of the Gülen movement is very high anyway, and that's what's unique about the group. And of course, the education level will be important when we are trying to understand their non-radicalization. So this is the study population. So in analyzing the qualitative data, first we looked at the risk factors, because before understanding how they were not radicalized, which is the non-radicalization phenomenon, we want to understand whether they had any risk factors that we call them enabling factors, under which any person would be susceptible or vulnerable for radicalization. And in the literature, they are usually separated into pull and pull factors. And pull factors include human rights violations, forced migration, and job loss. Of course, there are more, but these are the ones we specifically found within our participants' experiences. And the push factors include the structural factors like demonization, discrimination, or stigmatization. Again, these are the ones that we were able to find. We put many examples in the article which was published recently, but I just want to mention several of them here. I want to read quickly. So one person said, who was a teacher, 46-year-old male, said, "When my first statement was taken while in custody, they seriously beat me. They battered. My hands are in reverse handcuffs. They slap and punch me in the face. They are kicking me in the stomach, in my cavities, and I passed out after that. The second person or another participant who was a police officer at the age of 52, he was detained by the intelligence agencies in outside Turkey somewhere, and then he was taken back to Turkey, and he's recounting his experiences, the torture he had to endure with these words. He said, "Now they came to me, they blindfolded me again. They covered me with something like a big towel. They keep behaving like animals. That's why I said they are probably going to kill me. God, my mouth is foaming. I say I can't breathe. One side of my body is completely numb and they are pressing." So I didn't read the whole thing, but you can see, you can understand the context. Again, there are many examples in the article, but the main point with these factors, enabling factors, was to show that despite having all the enabling factors, this group of individuals are not radicalizing, and which is unique, which is unseen before. If you look at other cases in different countries, most of the people who endure the same type of victimization are getting involved in some type of radicalization or violence. But we have seen almost zero radicalization, sign of radicalization, let alone any type of terrorist violence. So then it prompted the question of how this happened. And we wanted to understand the processes and the factors leading to this. We call these factors as protective factors, and they are called with the same nomenclature in the literature. So people in the same situation, if they are not radicalizing, if they are not resorting to violence, not joining to gangs or any type of group like that, it means there are some type of protective factors involved. When we asked our participants, they said the first and most important reason was the Hizmet doctrine. By Hizmet doctrine, they mean the teachings of Fethullah Gülen. Of course, we didn't have time to delve into the meaning of what kind of, different doctrinal issues are at play. It would require a lot of different type of research. That wasn't our purpose, and I know that other people are doing that. But we just wanted to understand from with their own words, what was the most important controlling self-control mechanism which was preventing them from resorting to violence. And that was the first reason or factor, Hizmet doctrine. The second one was the religious beliefs, like belief in fate or it's a divine test. Almost all of our participants used sentences like that. And then they referred to these religious beliefs in terms of preventing them from violence or radicalization. The third factor was the personality traits like belief in nonviolence, belief in pacifism or legitimacy or altruism. And to understand this, we conducted the interviews in the form of oral histories where we started asking questions from their childhood to understand whether these personality traits were stable over the course of their lives. And it was the case that when we asked different questions from their childhood, in almost all of our participants, we saw these personality traits as prevalent. All of them believed in nonviolence, no matter how difficult the situation was. And they believed in the pacifism and using legitimate means. So some of them said, ends do not justify means. And then if your ends are legitimate, then your means should be legitimate as well, which was interesting. They also mentioned or showed signs of altruistic behavior. All of them had these personality traits. The fourth factor was the human and social capital that they had. And by human and social capital, we mean the resources available to anybody in terms of social or economic or human capital like education. And they are split into several groups: bonding social capital, bridging social capital, or linking. Bonding means the capital which we derive from our relationship with our friends or family. We have strong bonds. It has a preventing effect. And the bridging is the bridging or relationships with other groups. And the linking social capital determines one's relationship with the state institutions. And also the online social networks. Almost all of our participants mentioned that they are still involved in or members of different social networks, belong to the Hizmet movement. By the way, they call the movement as Hizmet movement, which means service. So most of them refer to the movement as Hizmet instead of using Gülen movement. So these four factors were very important, but among the four, the most important emphasis was made or placed on the Hizmet doctrine, because they said, even though our religious beliefs were important, we learned our religion via the Hizmet. So if I were not a member of the Hizmet, my understanding of different religious concepts would be different. And if you consider that most of the population in Turkey are Muslims, 98%, they specifically said that I would be one of them, because they are Muslims, but they're on side of the oppressor or the tyrant. But what made me different in terms of religious beliefs is I'm a member of, or I'm sympathetic to Hizmet movement, and then Hizmet has had a different interpretation in terms of different religious beliefs. That's why Hizmet doctrine has the most important impact or influence in this. Again, if you consider or look into the personality traits issue, most of our participants and the members of the movement in general joined the movement at the age of around like 13, which is their formative years. So even their personality traits are influenced by the Hizmet doctrine. So believe in nonviolence, pacifism, legitimacy, altruism. They are personality traits, but they are cultivated through the Hizmet doctrine. And they made these linkages with all other factors, meaning that they see Hizmet doctrine as the most important internal locus of control mechanism for them not to join any violent group, not to radicalize. On top of this, they also show remarkable resilience. So besides being non-violent, they try to do positive things in life for themselves and for other people, which is also, I think, interesting and remarkable. Being subjugated by the state through different human rights violations, many people would expect that these people would not have an easy time to be resilient, but they are showing remarkable resilience. And also, thinking about all of these factors, we thought that the Hizmet doctrine especially had functioned or has functioned as an inoculation. We call it inoculation effect. Inoculation meaning like vaccine. So when we are vaccinated, what happens is it protects us against the diseases in the future that we may have. So in the same fashion, Hizmet doctrine, people were inculcated by the Hizmet doctrine at the age of 13 and onwards. And when they had a problem, meaning when they became subjugated by the state after especially the July 15 coup attempt and the regime, it popped out and then it intervened and it prevented them from doing, negative things, joining violent groups, gang groups, or being radicalizing. So we kind of conceptualized this issue by seeing it as an inoculating effect. And there are also some quotes which prove or which support this idea of inoculation. As you can see, one soldier who was at the age of 45 male said it's because it was nothing different from what we were taught. There is no destructive attitude in the teachings of these people. By teachings, he was talking about his Hizmet doctrine, and he continued by saying that it's interesting that these people seek law even in the midst of lawlessness in Turkey. Therefore, I think they behave in this way because this is embedded in their DNA. And another person said, in other words, we normally have a belief in fate that's even a leaf cannot move without the will of Allah. And this sentence was almost used by all our participants, and it's very popular saying within the Islamic culture in Turkey, not only this movement, but they made a greater emphasis on this belief that even a leaf cannot move without the will of Allah. It symbolizes the people's beliefs in fate and their belief in destiny. So this is kind of some scientific framework that we put together to make it more intelligible for people. So basically, we have the same factors embedded in this framework so that other people who would like to use the same method can apply it in different contexts. We call it socio-ecological framework for non-radicalization and resilience. This socio-ecological framework was used in other studies, so we adapted it. Basically, we talked about the macro system factors or macro system protective factors as religious beliefs and Hizmet doctrine, exosystem factors, mesosystem factors, and micro, the same issues in a different way. So to conclude, I want to say first that from all of these things, all of these studies, what we came to a conclusion that FETÖ is a constructed term. So no member of the movement and many people who support or who are sympathetic to the movement don't accept the word FETÖ because it's a pejorative hate term. And it's a constructed term by the government, the Erdogan regime, as part of a political project to eliminate people who oppose the regime or the Erdogan himself. So it's not a real thing, it's a constructed phenomenon. And these two studies have implications, and they show us the importance of the effects of the state-led extremism on individuals or groups. Because when you look at the terrorism literature, mostly we see the literature that focus on terrorist groups, but not many focus is given to state actors or state-sponsored actors. We conceptualize what happened in Turkey to these people as state-led extremism, and we think and we believe that scholars and researchers and other people, experts and politicians, need to talk more about the effects of the state-led extremism on individuals. And if you look around in the global politics today, you are going to see that this doesn't only apply to Turkey. There are many countries in which some people are being victimized, being subjugated because of the state-led extremism, and it leads to more people to get radicalized and join violent groups. And the Gülen movement case is a unique case, even though they have been victimized and subjugated. There's no radicalization, but in other places we may see that. That's why it's important to look into this issue. And once again, these people are participants, and the Gülen movement followers in general have shown remarkable resilience despite their significant suffering. And that's why we think Hizmet movement sets a good example for non-radical solutions for governments or states for any counterterrorism or countering violent extremism stakeholder. There are too many lessons to learn from the movement and from the people within the movement, and I think it should be utilized. And the last thing is somewhat related to this, that we need to conduct more like cross-cultural studies in the future to compare different types of people who show similar types of resilience and non-radicalization with the Gülen movement or Hizmet movement followers, so that we can have a better understanding in terms of the factors of non-radicalization. So I want to end there, and thanks again for the invitation. If you have any questions, I will be happy to respond. Thank you.
Dr. Yılmaz, thank you for your insightful presentation. I really appreciate the valuable perspective you have shared. I would like to ask you a question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the question is, how do state policies on combating radicalization impact individuals and societies? Yeah, the question is, yeah.
Okay. How state policies impact individuals? I think it's closely related and linked to what I was saying at the end in my conclusion. The states should be aware and cognizant of the fact that the policies that they are using to counter terrorism or violent extremism have enormous impact and ramifications on individuals. And the rule of law, adherence to rule of law is a must, sine qua non of any counterterrorism policies. And if you look at the bad examples in the world, when there's a state repression, we see more people getting radicalized, joining different violent extremist groups or terrorist groups, or resorting to violence or joining the gangs. That's why the states should not be giving them excuses, quote unquote, to resort to negative solutions. And they need to, because people have different grievances in life, right? It can be political grievances, economic grievances, or social grievances. If we do not create an opportunity space for individuals to address their grievances, then they will be looking for, other venues. And in any situation, as human beings, we see ourselves as, in a situation, we see ourselves a moral patient if we are victimized or subjugated, for example. And in that kind of situation, then we start seeking who are the moral agents of our suffering, right? Then if the moral agent is determined or identified to be a state institution or a state or government, then we will or human beings will naturally go against the government, and they will go towards other actors who are providing different solutions to them. That's why states should be aware of this issue, and then they should adhere to the rule of law. They should respect for human rights, and they should never resort to violence or torture to maintain the security in a state, because there's a dilemma and a challenge for the states to strike a balance between the security and freedom. And some states are on the side of freedom while others are on the side of security. Then when this balance is not stricken, then we may have problems.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I have another question from chat. I want to also ask that question. Thank you very much for the great presentation. I would like to ask a question from a different perspective regarding the prevention of hate speech. What are the possible legal avenues and complaints mechanisms available in European countries against those who use hate speech related to FETÖ? To apply through this mechanism, is it necessary for an individual to be personally affected or for a legal entity to be recognized as a member of this group? Additionally, in order to initiate such applications, does the respective country need to legally define FETÖ speech as a criminal offense? Or is it sufficient for democratic countries such as the UK, Sweden, and the USA to recognize this speech as hate speech? Thank you. Emre.
Yeah, thank you, Emre. Very great question, but I think it all depends on the question, on the type of country we're talking about. So in most of the European countries and United States and Canada, we are seeing some problems in terms of accepting the FETÖ term as a hate speech. For example, recently I was invited to a panel by Meta to talk about different issues related to content moderation. And I mentioned about my studies and about the situation in Turkey. And I explained to them that the term FETÖ is a hate speech term and they should not allow this term on their platform because it cannot or may not be considered only within the confines of freedom of speech because the use of FETÖ has real implications in life. Some people, for example, in Europe, people who are familiar with the case and the movement know that they were beaten on the street just because of their links to the movement. So we have some physical implications of the use of FETÖ as a hate term. But despite my efforts, I could not convince the Meta and then the people in the room that FETÖ was a hate speech term because they thought it's a freedom of speech. We cannot do anything about that. But in terms of the mechanisms, I think we still have hate crime laws in every country. Anybody who is a victim, who feels that he or she is a victim of hate speech because of the use of FETÖ can follow the regular procedure and file a complaint that, because of so and so, I am being victimized, and then measures should be taken against this.
Thank you. We extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Kamil Yılmaz for his insightful and enlightening presentation. Today we have seen that hate speech not only harms individuals and society at large, but also plays a crucial role in the spread of extremist ideologies and violence. At this point, we have once again understood the critical importance of academic research, social awareness, and collaborative efforts by policymakers in combating hate speech and radicalization. Additionally, through case studies from Turkey, we have gained valuable insights into the process of disengagement from radical ideologies. I would like to thank all participants for taking the time to engage with these important topics. Once again, I extend my appreciation to Dr. Kamil Yılmaz for sharing his knowledge and expertise with us. You can also access this webinar on our YouTube channel. Please don't forget to support us by subscribing to our channel. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you all very much.
Thanks again, Abdullah, for the invitation, and thanks everyone for joining. Bye-bye.